April Dunford has positioned hundreds of products so far in her career and helped redefine how we think about positioning itself. She's the author of Obviously Awesome, and with its upcoming expanded edition, she joins us today to break down what great positioning looks like. Welcome, April.
It's awesome to be here. Thanks for having me.
You've mentioned in your book and posts that it's worth taking the time to define what positioning is before you dive into a conversation about positioning. So I was wondering if we could let's start there.
Yeah, let's do it. You know, it's a funny thing, positioning. So here I am, I'm the positioning expert, right? So generally I'm selling to tech companies. And so I'll meet the founder, the CEO, and they'll be like, positioning, I know what that is. It's messaging. And I'll say, no, well, but not really, actually. Like if we were to do messaging, I would say, well, I can do messaging, but I got to ask you some questions first. Who is this message for? And who do you compete against? And how do you win against those people? And what makes your stuff so special? We want to message around that. Positioning, in my mind, defines these inputs that we use for messaging and all kinds of things. So my definition looks like this. Positioning defines how your product is the best in the world at providing something, some value that a well-defined set of customers cares a lot about. Another way to think of it is it's a little bit like context setting for products. Like context is kind of how we make sense of the world, but in particular, things that we've never figured out before. Positioning helps people understand what bucket should this product live in and why should I pay attention to it.
The great story from the book was the violinist playing. Was he a
Yeah.
violinist? Yeah. You want to tell that just high level, that story?
Yeah. This is a really famous story. The Washington Post did this experiment. They called it an experiment in perception and attention, but it was with this violinist called Joshua Bell. And so at the time, Joshua Bell was probably one of the most famous violinists on the planet. He's regularly selling out concert halls for $300, $400 a ticket. And so the experiment was, we're going to take this famous violinist, we're going to have him play out in front of a busy metro station. And the experiment is, is anybody going to notice that the music is better than it normally is? That was the first thing. And then the second thing is, would he make more money as a street performer than a regular, guy off the street playing whatever? And so they dressed him down, in a ball cap and a schlumpy shirt. And they put him in front of the subway station and he plays his guts out for 3 hours. And he made, I can't remember the exact number, but it's like $32.73. Not so good, really. And then when they looked, and hardly anybody even stopped to listen to him play, 2 people slowed down. And at the very, very end, if you watch the video, one woman recognized him because she had seen him in concert the week before. And so at the very end, she came by and went, what the heck is going on? Walked over and said, I know you're Joshua Bell. But she was the only one. And so the interesting thing about it was, you may have thought, okay, well, maybe people just didn't have any change, or maybe they're late for work. Just because he didn't make a lot of money and people didn't stop doesn't mean that they didn't necessarily notice that the music was way better. So they went around and they interviewed people that were exposed to him playing. And so there was a lottery kiosk on the other side of the square. And there were people standing in line to buy a lottery ticket, right? So they went and they interviewed these people. They were like, hey, notice anything different about the music this morning? And the responses were hilarious. Like there was one guy who could tell you exactly the numbers he played on his lottery ticket. And they said, well, what did you think about the guy playing? He said, I don't know. It's just some guy trying to make a buck. And then they had the best was they had the shoe shine lady. So there's a lady in the corner and she's has a shoe shine stand and she's there every day. And they went over to her and they said, hey, did you notice anything different about the music this morning? She said, oh, yes, I did. That guy was making such a racket. I was going to call the cops and make him stop. And so you're like, what happened? What happened? And the answer is the guy was undone by his context. He was undone by his context. We're not expecting the music to be good. If I'm the shoe shine lady, I look across the plaza and what do I see? I see the guy in his baseball cap and his schlumpy shirt and he's standing beside the garbage can. And I just look at that and say, nothing to see here, street performer, right? But I take that same person and I put them in a concert hall in a tuxedo, and you paid $400 for the ticket. And I got a program that says he won all kinds of awards and he's a child prodigy since the age of 3 and blah, 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 blah. And you're going to go, oh my gosh, that guy's a genius. Positioning is a bit like this. It's a bit like this when we think about context setting. Even a world-class product can be perceived as something that's just nothing special if I position it in the wrong context.
That's a great comparison. When you are about to drop this expanded edition of the book, I'll hold it up.
So exciting. Yeah.
Why now? What made you want to revisit this topic now?
So many reasons. So many reasons. Okay. Reason number one, let me tell you. So the book is 6 years old, 7 years old. When I first wrote that book, well, okay, first of all, I'd never written a book before, so I didn't know what the heck I was doing. So it was a terrible experience, to tell you the truth, because I wrote the book. I thought it was perfect. Like when I gave it to the editors, I was like, put a bow on it. It's perfect. You just publish that sucker. And they redlined the entire thing and sent it back to me. And I realized that I had written an incomprehensible pile of crap. And so then I went back and I spent 2 months and I rewrote it, and I had great editors, thank goodness. And and I feel like they really wove some gold out of that straw. Anyway, so we got to something that was pretty good. I did not expect to sell a lot of copies, to be honest. Like when I first approached publishers with the idea for the book, publishers hated it. They were all like, positioning is this old topic. We already got a book on positioning. It was published in 1982. Why do we need another one? And they kind of didn't see my vision for this thing, which was, yes, there was a lot written about positioning, but what I wanted to do is have a book that was kind of an instruction manual of how to do it, like step 1, step 2, step 3, because I was wrestling with that as an in-house head of marketing. So anyway, so I put the book out expecting maybe I'll sell a few hundred copies of this thing, maybe to my own consulting clients, or people that can't afford to hire me as a consultant would read the book instead and self-serve it. And I could have less coffee meetings trying to explain to founders this totally complicated thing in like an hour over cappuccinos. And that was the idea. And then it ended up selling a ton of copies. Like as of right now, if you add up paperbacks and audiobooks and ebooks, it's over 100,000 copies of that book, which is kind of amazing when you think it's a bit of a niche topic. I'm really only talking about B2B tech companies. I'm only talking about positioning. It's kind of an incredible number of copies. So that was great news. The bad news is that all these people read the book and people had feedback, and the feedback was not all good. So
people have opinions a lot of times.
Tech people have opinions. Let me tell you, they're not shy about sharing them. So I started noticing the places where people got confused. I would get these emails that would say, hey, I'm looking at page 100 and whatever, and you said this. And I'd read it and say, yeah, I can totally see why you didn't understand that. And I'd be like, and I'd send them sending these emails back saying, I know that I said that, but what I meant was this other thing, dude. So that was one thing. But if it was just that alone, I don't think I would have bothered updating the book. But that was one thing. The second thing was that when I wrote the book, I had quite a lot of experience doing positioning stuff. Like I had worked in-house for 20 some odd years. And as an in-house marketing person, I had launched a dozen or so products. So I had my own experience working in-house, but then I'd also been working as a consultant for 2-3 years. So I had worked with a few dozen clients, and I had taught a lot of courses on this stuff. And so I thought, yeah, I've got my arms around this. I get how to teach it. I get where people get stuck. I get all this stuff. But then I put the book out, and then it started selling a lot of copies. So then I started working with a lot more clients. Fast forward now, I've worked with hundreds of companies. And there's a handful of things that I guess you would call them patterns that I see now after I've done 300 companies that I didn't see when I had done 50. And after thinking about it for 6-7 years, it's like, wow, these are really repeatable. Like I see these over and over and over again. Some of the things I touched on them in the book, but I didn't go that deep on them. Some of them I didn't even touch it at all. So I thought, well, it would be good at some point to update that book and add all this extra stuff because I'm smarter now about these things. And we could put that in the book too. The other thing that happened was at the time when I wrote the book, I was working a lot with earlier stage companies like Series A, well, what we used to call Series A, Series B. I don't know what a series is anymore, but smaller companies. And for the most part, they were single product companies.
Mm.
After the book came out and people started to know me better, I started getting calls from bigger companies. And there's a distinct set of challenges if you're a multi-product company when it comes to positioning that I didn't touch on at all in the first version of the book. So I thought, okay, so after 6-7 years, the book's still selling really well. I thought, you know what? Before I'm done with this positioning thing, I'm going to go back and update that book and just shove everything I know in there and fix all the confusing stuff, add the second set of patterns that I'm seeing now that I've done way more companies, and then maybe add a little bit more flavor for folks that are in a multi-product company that are trying to do something that's a little bit trickier. So that's what you're going to get in the new version. It's the do-over. I'm excited about it.
How cool is it that you've been learning and growing and you're able to say, oh, okay, I see things differently now, and go back and do it.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't get a do-over in a lot of things in life, but it turns out a book, you can get a do-over. You call it a second edition. There you go.
And that'll be coming out soon.
Soon. It should be like mid to late February 2026. This is what we're aiming for. But you know what? It's Amazon's world and we just live in it. So we'll see when it comes out. Don't send me a note complaining because it's February 28th and you haven't seen it yet.
We might time this. It might be the same day that this episode comes out. What
go to Amazon right now and check and report back. Is it there or not?
Leave a comment. Did you buy it? In one of your posts this week, you talk about, if you guys aren't subscribed to her Substack, it's wonderful. It's like a treasure trove of guides and fun little stories. So go there. In your post this week, you talk about the first steps someone should take before diving into positioning. That's my accent coming out. Can you break that down for us?
Yeah. So this came from me rethinking the way I talked about the positioning process. So in the original book, I talk about positioning and I break it apart into 5 component pieces. And then the process has 10 steps. Now, I didn't think that was a problem, but let me tell you, numbers people think that's a problem. So I got a lot of emails that were like, April, it should be 5 components and 5 steps. Why is it 5 components and 10 steps? We don't like this. The numbers don't match. Complaining.
5A and 5A and 5B.
Oh my gosh. And so that got me thinking about, is it really 10 steps or is it 5 steps? And in fact, the more I got thinking about it, the first few steps were really things you do before a positioning exercise to get ready for a positioning exercise. And then the last couple of steps were things you do after the positioning exercise is done. So I rearranged it. So we now have 5 components and 5 steps.
Oh gosh, thank you so much.
Never send me that email complaining about that again. All of you out there listening, 5 and 5. I hear you.
Finally,
I changed. And anyways, so in the pre-work, I kind of have the pre-work separated into 2 things. So the first one is there's a set of decisions you have to make before you start at all, like before you even assemble a team, before you do anything on this positioning. And it consists of a set of things. So one is now the right time to do positioning? So this is one of, and a lot of people that call me that say, hey, bro, we want you to work on positioning. I say, okay, great. Now, are you in market with this product? Have you sold any of this product? Is almost always my first question. Because if we're not in market with the product and we haven't sold it yet, then we don't actually know that much. Like what we have, we could do the positioning process and come up with positioning, but what we would have is a positioning thesis. It would just be our best guess. And in my experience, when I was working in-house, we always had a thesis, but we were never right. Like sometimes we were close and sometimes we were way the heck off, like nowhere close. And so in my mind, if what we're doing is doing positioning to get a thesis, I think that's a worthy thing to do, but I would not pay a consultant to come in and help me do it because it's just a thesis. It's probably going to change. So I wouldn't spend a lot of money on that. In fact, I wouldn't spend any money on that. I'd do that internally. And I would treat it like a thesis, meaning we would look at it internally, but I wouldn't necessarily put it on my homepage like, hey, this is exactly what this thing is, because we know it's going to change. And I think it actually works well to keep your positioning kind of loose and feel where the market pulls you a little bit. So that's the first thing. Do you really want to get the big team together and say, okay, we're doing our positioning, we're going to really nail this thing, when you haven't even really launched it yet? I think you'd be better to just work out a thesis. It's a rough idea. Here's who we think we compete with. Here's how we think we're different. This is the value we think we can deliver. This is who we think is going to love this. Now let's go out and see, is that true? So that's one thing. Like,
And
you should figure out, is now a good time to do it? Second thing is, like, a lot of people come into positioning and they're not really clear whether they're doing positioning for customers or positioning for investors or
those are
positioning
not
for,
the same.
they are not the same, not the same at all. In fact, so if you're positioning for investors, I mean, investor is a particular kind of audience with particular things that they care about. So what they're looking at is this going to be a big, big business in the future? How is this going to disrupt the market that it's in? Not today necessarily, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, because they're making a long-term investment. Customer, on the other hand, wants to know, hey, I'm giving you my cold hard cash today, and I'm not swapping that for tomorrow's promises. I'm swapping that for whatever you're selling me today. And if you come and you say, hey, I got this amazing thing, but it's not going to ship for 3 years, the customer is going to go, great, come back when you got it, buddy. I'm not buying
Yeah.
it now. What I found when we're doing a positioning exercise, if we don't explicitly talk about that at the beginning, then what you'll have is some people in the room will be saying, oh, this is for investors, right? And then you got to go, whoa, step back. No, let's go back to the beginning, and let's all be clear, this is for customers. The other thing is, I don't know what works for positioning for investors. You know what? I think I would be a very wealthy person if I did. And I've never seen anybody with a structure of an investor pitch that really works for everybody. And there's lots of theories on this, but I think there's a bit of alchemy to that. Positioning for customers, on the other hand, I know how to do that. So if you're using, my process is intended for customers. If you're doing something for investors, God love you, I don't know how to do that. I'm not sure anybody does. I think there's some magic involved there, but that's a different kind of a pitch. So those are two things. The other thing I think that's important, coming back to this idea that you might have multiple products, is, are you positioning the product or the company, or are you positioning some combination of products? So if you're a single product company, then in my opinion, the positioning of the product and the company are the same. These are not two separate things, or at least they shouldn't be. Like, why would you make it so hard for yourself? If I'm a company and I just sell one thing, there's no difference between the company and the product.
So many
But
of
if
us
I
do,
sell
though.
two things, now there's a question. Well, what are we positioning? Are we positioning just one product? Are we positioning the company, which is the umbrella positioning that encompasses everything that all your products can do? And then, of course, you might have something even more complicated than that we have a suite of things. And so before you go into the positioning exercise, you need to actually make some decisions about go-to-market strategy. Like, how do we want customers to buy? Do we want them to buy everything all at once? Do we expect that they would buy one thing first and then we would position everything else as an add-on or cross-sell? So we got to make this decision first and then decide what we're going to position. Like, if everything's an add-on or a cross-sell, then we're going to position the main thing first, and then we can position everything else with the assumption that the customer has already bought this thing. But if it's a platform or a suite or some kind of combination of products, well, that's different. Now we're positioning them all together. So again, there's a set of decisions that I think it's important to make before you even start positioning.
It can feel slow or boring, or like, why do we have to stop and do this? How do you get founders to say this has to happen first?
Yeah. The decisions that you have to make before you do the position exercise, like, most of the time, these decisions aren't hard. You just need to make them. Like, we just need to say, hey, like, because if we don't, then what you'll do is you'll get halfway down the positioning process, and then someone will say, wait a second, I thought we were doing this for investors. Or they'll say, wait a second, like, why are we positioning all these things together? That's not how we sell it. Everybody always buys this thing first and then they worry about the other thing. And then what are you going to do? You're going to have to go all the way back to the beginning and then start again. So I think we just need to agree at the beginning. Okay, is this for customers? Yes. Okay, are we positioning this thing because it's the lead product? Yes. Or no, we actually want to position the whole suite. Okay, fine, let's get the whole suite. So it's usually, this is easy peasy stuff. And a lot of times when companies call me, I'm asking those questions, and a lot of the times the company knows the answer. Like they'll just be like, yes, no, yes, no. Sometimes they'll be like, ooh, actually, we never really thought about that. And then they need to actually go figure that out.
Or we've just kind of let that be a thing we haven't addressed yet.
Yeah, that's right.
When you talk about 3 different types of positioning, you had the head-to-head, where you go after the category leader,
Yeah,
the big fish in a small pond, where you try to take a small piece of a market, and
yeah,
then creating your own game or category design.
yes,
Do you
yes.
have a favorite or one that's the most fun for you?
That's a good question. The vast majority of the companies that I work with, this is not a symptom of the companies that I work with. This is actually the vast majority of successful companies on the planet in the early stages of their existing are doing this big fish, small pond thing because it's the fastest path to success. It's the easiest way to crack into a market where you come in and you say, look, we're CRM for grocery stores. I know what a CRM is. I know what a grocery store is. Okay, your CRM for grocery stores. I got a starting point, and now you can pitch me whatever your CRM for grocery stores does. If I come in, and do this category design thing, this is a little bit like me coming in and saying, what I've got is it's called lettuceinator. And you're like,
Oh,
what's that? And I'm
uh-huh.
like, it's for grocery stores. And, and then I got to explain what it is without referencing any existing category. So I got to explain what this thing is from scratch. And so category creation is actually really, really hard. There's the vast majority of companies that are successful with category creation are companies that are already category leaders in the existing category they play in. And what they're actually doing is expanding the boundaries of it and saying, okay, we absolutely dominate this space. Now we're going to, define it as a bigger space, and we'll define the category as something bigger. That makes a lot of sense. But if you're an early company, there's established categories all around you, and then you want to establish your own new category. It's not that that's impossible, but there's very few examples of companies that set out to create a category, successfully created the category, and then lived to be the leader in that category. So most of the successful companies that we know and love today were not category creators. Like Google did not create the search category. There were lots of companies in there, Ask Jeeves and all these
Oh,
things. And
yeah.
MySpace was a thing long before Facebook showed up. And Facebook showed up and essentially wedged into the market with a big fish, small pond, and then swallowed them up. And this is true of almost every BlackBerry did smartphones for years before Apple showed up and wiped them off the face of the earth. So it's very difficult to do category creation and have that actually be successful. But that said, if we're in an emerging market, like there's some new technology, that has enabled new stuff that we couldn't actually do before, often you have no choice but to create a market category, because attempting to position it in any existing category kind of undersells what you do. And so you don't have any choice. So if I look at the clients that I work with, about 1 in 10 end up being category creation situation because the thing is really innovative and it's new and it doesn't really fit anywhere else. The others are typically big fish, small pond. The head-to-head one, which is the third style, you would only ever do this if you were number 2 in the market already and you see some weakness in the category leader for some reason, and you're going to attempt to take them on at their own game and beat them at their own game.
When is it a trap to stay in an existing category versus create another one?
Here's the thing. The key to good positioning is really understanding what your differentiated value is. So, what is the value that you can deliver to a customer that no other product can? And so, first thing, you got to get really tight on that. What is it we deliver that no one else can? And then once we understand that, then we can take a step back and say, okay, well, who cares a lot about that? Like, what kind of businesses care about that if I'm selling to businesses? Like, what are the characteristics of a target account? Make them really care about the value they're only going to get from us. Now I got the value, I've got the target account. Then I think I can stand back and say, all right, is there an existing category that works here? So if I say I'm a database, does that take a customer and point them at my value? Or does it kind of point them somewhere else? And now my marketing and sales team have to say, no, we're not that. No, over here. I use database as an example. Is a company that I worked with. early in my career. And we were selling this thing, and it was a database. It was founded by two guys with PhDs in database technology. They're database guys. We're selling a database. And we got this fancy new database. It's got this patented algorithm thing that allows it to do a certain kind of query super, super, super fast, like 1,000 times faster than a regular database. And so when we went out to sell the thing, we'd be like, hey, we got this cool database. And the problem with that, there was just so many problems with that. One was everybody had a database. And not only that, most companies didn't want to have multiple databases. They wanted to standardize on one database. And we come in and say, but hey, we're this database that could do this special thing really good. And they're like, I don't know if we want that because we already have a database to do all the things. And, you're coming in trying to do this special thing. If we had really taken a step back and said, what's the value we can deliver? Well, we had this patented thing that allowed us to do this certain kind of query really, really fast. Well, if you looked at the type of query we were doing, it's really an analytic query. So then you'd say, well, okay, how is a company doing analytic queries today? Back in those days, they would use a data warehouse to do that, which is not the same thing as a database. And back then, there wasn't a lot of packaged data warehouse software to do it with. So they would build their own data warehouse. Ooh. So they would have database software, and then they'd be tinkering around building a data warehouse. So we were comparing ourselves to the wrong thing. So we were putting ourselves in this database bucket and then trying to explain how we could do this analytic query, blah, blah, blah. In the end, what we did was we switched our positioning and said, no, what we are is a data warehouse. Then all of a sudden, it was way more clear what we were doing, that we weren't trying to do any kind of query. We were just trying to do this analytic type query. And we could say, look, instead of having to build your own, we're going to give you a packaged one. And that's going to save you a lot of time, energy, and effort to do it. But the key to getting that category right was understanding the value. So we had never done that work before. Like everyone had just been like, we're database people, we're selling it. That's what we are. What else could we be? Yeah. Like nobody ever questioned that. But then when you saw how badly it worked, positioning us in the database category, you're like, okay, we could do better than that. And then you're like, okay, what category should we be in? And we should be in the category where our value is obvious. And so if you get your arms around your differentiated value and you look at the category and say that's just fundamentally not what solutions in that category does, then you got to be in a different category. And so sometimes if what you do is so new and so interesting, and oh my gosh, there just isn't anything out there like that, then you're going to be forced to create a new category to hold it.
Let's talk about velocity. Content's pumping out. Product cycles are faster. Everything's, you've got 10 competitors tomorrow. How does this speed change positioning?
So here's the thing. If you go to marketing school and they teach you about positioning, most of what you're going to learn is about consumer packaged goods. And they're going to say, look, here's the way it works in consumer packaged goods. I got toothpaste for babies. So I got baby toothpaste. Here it is. Right now, if I decide I'm going to make toothpaste for old lady dentures, I don't say this is toothpaste for babies and old ladies. I come out with a new toothpaste. Now it's going to have a new package, new position, new everything. Product might be the same actually, but you wouldn't attempt to stretch that one product. You would just say, look, I got another product and this one is for denture people, denture wearers. In tech, and particularly in B2B tech, we often start out selling a product to a set of buyers that is the market we can reach right now with the product that we have right now. But we have this expectation that this product is going to grow and evolve, be greater and greater every year, that 10 years from now, it's probably delivering a completely different value, possibly to a completely different set of buyers. And so we expect our positioning to change. We expect it to change. Consumer packaged goods, like you won't learn that in marketing school if you go to marketing school. They won't teach you that. But in tech, this is normal. We're all doing this. And so generally what we have is there's the product the way it stands right now. There's the all singing, all dancing thing we want it to be in the future, which is what we sold to VCs.
Yes.
This thing. And then we have a strategy that gets us from A to B. And that strategy says, okay, a year from now, we're going to release this thing and it's going to look like this. And at that point, maybe we were still just selling to SMBs at that point, but at that point, we're going to be able to go to the mid market now. So we're going to sell to these guys in the mid market, and then we're going to build this other thing. And before we couldn't sell to banks, but now we're going to sell to banks. So we're going to reposition this thing and say now it's for banks and whatever. And then 10 years from now, we'll have this other thing. And most of the companies I worked in, we had that. We had the thing we were now. We had the thing we were selling to VCs. We had this strategy. We had a product roadmap. And then there's the reality of the real world, right? The things are happening every day that we couldn't predict. Competitors are doing stuff that we didn't predict. Things like, new technology pops up like AI that we thought we had our arms around it. Maybe we didn't. And then the roadmap's going to have to change, and the plan is going to have to change, and maybe the positioning is going to have to change with it. So we should expect that. So in the companies that I work with, and even before I was a consultant, when I was in-house, we would do the positioning to sort of take into account as much as we knew about the present. So we would say, basically, we were trying to answer the question, why pick us over the other guys right now with the product we have right now in the market the way it looks right now? We could guess a few steps into the future and say, well, we got a release. We know it's coming out in 8 months. We know exactly what it's going to do. We don't think the competitors are going to catch up to us. We could include that. But if we started to look too far in the future, like 2 years in the future, we're probably wrong. And it wouldn't make sense for us to position for that because we can't sell it. We don't have that yet. So we're going to position for the stuff that we have right now. Now, the way we did it when I was working in-house is we would get a cross-functional team together. We would do that positioning. And then every 6 months, we would have a check-in. And so it's 6 months later, we get the gang back together and we do like a speed run of the positioning process. And we'd say, okay, is anything changed? So, 6 months ago, this is what the competitor list looked like. Is it different now? And 6 months ago, our differentiated capabilities were these things. Did they catch up to us? Did maybe we released a new thing that allows us to do something that we couldn't do before? Has this list of differentiated capabilities changed? And then has that changed the value that we can deliver customers that the other guys can't, our differentiated value? If the answer was no to all those questions, like competitors are kind of the same, features changed a little bit, but not too much, value is the same, we're just strengthening that value, then we don't touch the positioning. Positioning doesn't change. But if we come back and we look like, no, these guys have caught up, the value has changed, well, then we got to go back to the drawing board and change the positioning. Now, you might think, oh my gosh, well, we got a product release every week around here, buddy. There's things are changing all the time. Wouldn't we just be changing the positioning all the time? And the reality is not generally. Like, even though individual little features are changing a lot in the short term, the features tend to contribute to some big value themes. And the big value themes don't tend to move that quickly, even though the features do. And so those tend to be measured more in years than in months. Although there's always a risk that something weird can happen in the market where we're truly surprised. And then we call the emergency positioning meeting, get everybody together and say, okay, cards up in the air. I had a company once where we had this great positioning. We had a strategic partnership with MySQL. And so we had this great positioning. We were doing all this stuff with them, and that was working really good. And then MySQL got acquired by Sun. And that was bad for our position. So we kind of had to go call the emergency meeting, go back to the drawing board, rejig the positioning. That worked great for, I don't even know how long that lasted, not even a year. And then Sun got acquired by Oracle. Oh. And not only did Sun get acquired by Oracle, but we were still positioning quite hard around our integration with MySQL. Well, Oracle was making all these noises about maybe we're going to fork it, maybe we're going to do stuff with it. And the MySQL community was freaking out. And so we had to completely deposition away from MySQL. So that was two big positioning shifts in the span of a year and a half for things that we could never have predicted. We could never have predicted that. And so I think you just have to be ready for that. At the same time, I can point you to a product, the first product I ever worked on, which was over 20 years ago. That product was eventually acquired by SAP. It was a very successful product in its heyday. And I think was just sunset last year. But if you looked at the landing page for that product, the positioning was not that different from what we had positioned it 20 years prior. So what does that tell you? We don't really know, right? The best we can do is just check in on it And if we think there's a need to change it, we change it. If there isn't, we let it run.
Pre-book those calendar meetings for 6 months out because you'll forget.
That's what you should do. Yes.
Get meta for a moment here. You've positioned countless products.
Yes.
Then you positioned yourself as the authority globally on positioning.
It's so meta.
What did you learn about personal branding and positioning when you did it to yourself?
Yeah. I mean, it would be pretty bad if you were the positioning consultant. You didn't position yourself very good.
Yeah. Basically, anyone who shows up and isn't you're on the first page of every search. So you've done it you've positioned quite well.
Here's the thing. In my opinion, I think, as an expert, which is what I'm trying to position myself as an expert in a narrow thing, it's kind of the same as positioning a really niche product, in that you just get really clear on what you do, which also involves being really clear on what you don't do. So in the early days, when I was trying to figure out what I was going to focus on as a consultant, I did a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But once I decided to settle on positioning, I just said no to all the other work. Now, I had the luxury of being able to do that because I was doing this later in my career, so I wasn't starving to death. And I don't know how you say no as much as I did if you were 25 and starving to death. But I had the luxury of being able to say no. Like, people would come and say, hey, do our messaging. And I go, no, I don't do that. Hey, do our customer research. No, I don't do that. Hey, do our homepage. No, I don't do that. And just doing the one thing that I thought I was really good at. The advantage of that is you get the reps in. So you end up working with a lot of companies doing the same thing over and over and over again, which makes you really good. Like, it makes you really good. And so there's this kind of virtuous cycle that happens. You're only doing this kind of work. You're getting very, very good at that kind of work. You get really well known for doing just that kind of work because you tell everybody, I only do this kind of work. Otherwise, don't call me.
Yeah.
And then because you get known for that particular thing, anytime it comes up in conversation, people point at you, you start ranking on searches and stuff like that. Everybody gets to know you as this person that does this one little thing. And then the end result of that is, because, you're in demand, and then you can raise the rates. And this is what we all want to do when we're in consulting, is not work all that much and charge a lot of money. And then the last secret of this is just stick it. That's actually the hard part in some ways, because
sticky means you will
just keep doing it.
Okay. Yeah.
So I see a lot of consultants, they do a thing and they're doing pretty good for a year. And then they're like, I'm sick of that thing now. I'm going to go do something else. And just when their positioning's starting to hit, then they're like, yeah, I'm not that anymore. I'm going to be this other thing. And it's okay. You start back from the beginning. So if you're going to pick something that you think you're going to still like in 5 years,
the human hedgehog.
Otherwise it's going to drive you crazy. So if I look at my positioning, it's really narrow. Like, I only do positioning work. I don't do messaging. There's all kinds of things I don't do. I only do positioning work. I only work with B2B tech companies only. Product companies. At the beginning, I did a handful of services businesses, and I will do a service business if they're a special case. But for the vast majority are product companies. Not only that, they're enterprise product companies, meaning they've got a sales team. There's a salesperson involved somewhere in a typical deal. So, I mean, that's pretty narrow. It's pretty narrow. And then you got to be a certain size. Like, if you're way too small and you haven't got the thing in market yet, then you're too small for me. And then my pricing at this point kind of eliminates really super early stage folks. But, that's what the book and everything else is for. I think folks that are really early stage can kind of self-serve. I don't think they need a fancy consultant to come in and do it for them. So that's pretty narrow positioning. And I've never tried to monetize anything else. Like, people come and say, can we sponsor your podcast? Or I'm like, I'm not a podcaster. I have a podcast, but that's not the business. The business is this positioning thing, right? So if I started sponsoring the podcast, well, now I'm in the podcasting business and I'd have to think about that. Or people say, well, why don't you sponsor your newsletter? I'm like, because I'm not in the newsletter business. The newsletter drives the consulting for the other thing. So some people, I think, there's this advice that people give to consultants that say it's good to have lots of income streams. And I'm against that. I think that's bad advice. But my At least it hasn't been my experience. My experience is if you get really laser focused on one thing, you get really, really good at that one thing. All your attention is on that one thing. Everything else you're doing is in service to that one thing. And that's how you get your rates up. And that's how everybody knows you. And that's how your pipeline's always full. And then you just do that for 10 years. Easy.
Playbook. It's a great segue. We're going to link to your Substack, to your podcast, to your website as well. And guys,
Sure.
the book, which will be out maybe on the day that this podcast comes out, maybe the
I'm
next
pretty
day.
excited about it just because a lot of things in that book were driving me a little bit crazy. So I'm going to be excited when it's just out there and I don't have to answer any of those emails anymore.
As long as we expect another
I
round.
know. I'm really worried that I've screwed it up and I've created more problems than I've actually solved. And that 2 weeks after the thing is out, they're going to be like, on page 26, you said this thing. And I'm like, no.
Do a debrief.
I hope not.
So some fun wrap-ups. What's one thing you've been reading or watching or listening to that you've been loving lately?
You know what? I've been going through a bit of a sci-fi phase.
Oh.
Yeah, I have. I never used to like sci-fi. I used to be like a very much big fiction person. But I don't know. Somehow I went into the sci-fi thing. And now I'm all sci-fi all the time to the point where people in my family are making fun of me. So did you see that series Foundation? Oh my God, so good. So not like the book, but also so good. And then I'm reading a book right now by this guy called Adrian Tchaikovsky called Children of Time, which is like this sci-fi book that's so creative. It's so creative that I'm like, what a neat idea. This guy's, what happens if we populated a planet with like super smart spiders?
I think that's what because he has it on tape. So while he's doing stuff around the house, the stories of the spider things of the
spider
planet.
thing.
Downstairs, I'm going to run down and be like, you're not the only one.
Oh my gosh. You know what's the worst part about reading science fiction? You read a bunch of science fiction and then you go and read a not science fiction book. Like I read this book called Hitch. It's kind of funny. You should read it. But you read a book that's not science fiction and you keep waiting for the science fiction to show up. You're like, oh, this is where the aliens show up. And then there's no aliens, no time skip, no nothing. You're like, what? That's it? It's just
They're just out on a date.
You're like, that's so boring. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll check out Children of Time, and Hitch will be something else just for funsies. And then what's one thing that
if you want a good laugh, if you want to actually feel joy in your heart.
Okay.
Adrian Tchaikovsky, at the end of I read another book by him, and at the very end, he has his book picture. And this is the most sci-fi person I've ever seen in my life. If you talk about positioning, if you wanted to create a character and that character was a sci-fi author, they would have the book headshot of Adrian Tchaikovsky. So there's a tip.
And then in terms of, is there anything this year that you're trying to learn or excited to work on?
So a handful of things. So like I say, I have this new version of the book out. And, it's interesting there's phases when you learn something, right? There's learning to do it. And then there's learning to do it really well. And then there's learning to teach it. And then there's learning to teach it really well. And so I still feel like this year on a lot of this new stuff that's covered in the new version of the book, I'm in the learning to teach it in a way that everybody gets it phase. So for example, this week I wrote a guest blog post for somebody that has a kind of popular newsletter. And I spent a lot of time on it and wrote this thing. And it was really kind of wonky positioning article. It was fun. I wrote it. And then he's got this really big popular newsletter. So he's got like a professional editor that looks at the thing. And she looked at it and was like, makes no sense. I don't know. Structure shit. And I was like, oh, damn it.
Headline.
But her comments were very spot on. It's a thing that I've had to do with, all my thinking on positioning. It's like one thing to know it. It's another thing to know how to do it. But then the teaching of it is actually really hard. And so this year, I think I'm sharpening the saw on some of those things. So that's one thing. The other thing is that just weird luck. Like obviously I'm working with a lot of AI companies or companies doing AI stuff. Like I think every single positioning project I'm doing right now is AI related. What's interesting about the companies I'm working with this year is a lot of them are bigger. So last year I had the beginning of the year, a lot of smaller companies, but towards the end of the year, a lot of bigger companies. This year I've got some enormous companies that have really sophisticated enterprise grade AI stuff that they're trying to position in the market. And that, I think, has been really interesting to me, to just see the difference between folks that are shipping stuff that is a bit more, it's for a market of tinkerers. A lot of AI stuff that's coming out right now is muck around with this, build your own things with this. It's for developers, it's for tinkers, it's for people that are trying to do cool stuff with AI. It's for people that couldn't do stuff without this tool, but now they have this tool and they can tinker around and do this thing, which is great. And so I worked with a bunch of companies like that last year, but this year I'm feeling like there's a shift. And a lot of the companies calling me are like, we got an enterprise grade thing that we need big companies to pay big money for. And this thing needs to work, and it needs to replace workflows and software, traditional software inside the enterprise right now. And that is a different thing. And it's been interesting to see that evolution in AI in the last couple of years, that we've started from everything's like a tool for tinkerers. And now we're getting closer into the meat. Where does this stuff really start making an impact on bigger enterprise businesses? So that's going to be interesting for me to work with companies on that this year.
It's exciting. Well, stay tuned.
Oh, yeah. So much. I'll tell you one thing. So much security and compliance. Like one of the biggest things is stopping bigger enterprises from adopting this AI stuff is worries about compliance and security. And I think we are finally getting to a stage where some of the bigger companies that understand enterprise compliance stuff, understand enterprise security, are now getting this AI stuff really enterprise ready. And so that's going to be interesting this year.
We'll stay tuned. I appreciate you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom. We're going to link so everybody can find you and follow you below. And I hope you have a fabulous rest of your day.
Thanks so much for having me. This has been great.
Yeah. Talk to you soon.